Is it okay to dump a car onto the motor trade when you know it has a serious fault? This all started when I saw a post on a Nissan Leaf owners group on Facebook where someone was selling off some accessories because he didn't have his Leaf anymore. And it turned out the reason he didn't have his Mark II Leaf any longer was because it had a serious fault with its battery, and rather than fixing it or scrapping it or whatever, he just sold it to We Buy Any Car. And he was almost gloating about this, saying, well, if they're not going to check the battery health before they make me an offer for it, then, well, more fool them. And it got me thinking, it seems that this attitude is really, really common. That, well, you know, if you've got a problematic car, we'll just sack it off to We Buy Any Car, and it becomes their problem. They're a big company, you know, it's not that big a deal. Nobody really gets hurt out of it. So what does it matter? Well, what do you think happens to that car when it gets sold to We Buy Any Car? Well, I'll tell you, because here it is for sale at BCA. So me, as an independent motor trader, I source quite a lot of my stock from BCA as well as other auctions, and it's now currently available. It'll be in a sale in a couple of days' time, and I can bid on it and I can buy it. And does it mention in any of the details here that there's a problem with the battery? Well, no, it doesn't. Battery health reports are optional. The vendor needs to specifically specify that they want to do that, and they will provide a report, which then you as the buyer end up getting charged for later. And that will give you some indication as to the battery health. And it's a really useful resource, but it's not something that's on every EV that's sold. So what happens is, I'll come along, I'll buy that, and all right, it's a Mark II, a 2018 Mark II Leaf that's done 120,000 miles. So realistically, it's not something I'd really want to retail anyway, a little bit up on the miles for that. But in theory, I'll come along, I'll bid for it. And yes, cosmetically, it's not great, but according to the assured report, everything else is in good order, apart from the fact that it needs a set of tyres. And so in theory, it could make quite a good retail car. And not every dealer is equipped to perform a battery health inspection on that when it turns up. So it turns up from the auction, having paid a decent chunk of the trade price for it, because they're not going to give it away. I suspect this will go for $3,500, something like that. It books at 4, but it's cosmetically a little bit rough. So I think $3,500 is probably about its money. And it turns up, and you know, yes, I do battery health checks on everything I sell, but not everybody does. So it then gets cleaned up, gets any mechanical work done that it needs, and it goes out the door to a retail customer. Probably someone an awful lot like the person that sold this thing to We Buy Any Car in the first place. And a few weeks later, they discover that not all is in fact well with this car. It doesn't quite perform as they'd expect, and being a Mark II 40 kilowatt hour Leaf that's a bit up in the miles, what will probably happen is you'll find that at lower states of charge, it will decline quite rapidly. You know, it'll go from like 40% to 20% quite quickly, especially if you're driving fast uphill on the motorway, stuff like that. And you'll start to think, I don't think the battery's quite right in this thing. I think there might be something wrong here. And you'll be on the phone shouting and screaming at the dealer that you've bought it from, this car's faulty, you've sold me a lemon, what are you going to do about it? And well, the dealer that's bought this thing from the auction and sold it on hasn't done anything wrong. Legally, yes, they'll need to stand behind the car they've sold and they'll need to put it right for the customer. But realistically, I think in this kind of scenario, you're going to refund them, you're going to give them their money back. And they're going to be left thinking, well, I wouldn't buy another one of those EVs. They're terrible. They're crap. The batteries don't last any time and they're rubbish. And these dealers are terrible. All they do is get these cars in, chuck a bucket of water over them and sell them on. But in fact, the real problem here is that somebody lied through their teeth in the first place and just binned it off to We Buy Any Car because, well, there's no consequence in that, is there? They're big enough, it doesn't matter. Nobody really loses out. And in fact, actually, several people lose out. We Buy Any Car isn't the organisation that lose out. BCA really don't. Maybe, yes, if it turned up and it was apparent straight away that there was a fault, you could maybe send it back because the assured report says that the battery's in good order. But because it's not specific about the health, unless it comes with a health report, there's really not that much recourse there. And so the dealer that buys it loses out. The customer that ends up buying it loses out. I mean, not all dealers are willing to stand behind what they sell either. So if the wrong person gets a hold of it, someone that isn't willing to stand behind what they sell and will just change phone number or whatever it is people do, you know, the type of people that sell cars at the side of the road and don't really have a proper sort of business presence, where they are a trader, but they're not really willing to admit to it, or they're selling from their driveway, but it's a private sale, you know what I mean, kind of thing. Those kind of people aren't going to stand behind what they sell. They're not going to warrant a car that they've sold, whether they legally have to or not, because ultimately they will just tell you to f*** off. Or they'll threaten you with violence, or they'll do whatever they need to do to get out of actually standing behind their product. And so the end customer will be left with this thing. So who loses out? Well, the poor soul that ends up buying the bloody thing is who loses out. Nobody else in the chain actually will give a shit at the end of the day. Yes, We Buy Any Car don't care, BCA don't care, the dealer that buys the thing might care, but the person that ends up with it is the one that's going to it over. And I don't know when it became acceptable to just say, well, it's not my problem. I'm not going to let on about the problem with it. I'll just bounce it off and it'll be fine. And it really, really winds me up. I'm sure you can tell. If I sold a car with a major fault that was undeclared, people would drag me over the coals. It would be the worst thing in the world. People would be absolutely baying for my blood. They'd want me in court. They'd want this. They'd want that. And, as the dealer, I would be the worst person imaginable. And the likelihood of it being the very same kind of people that would dump a lemon onto We Buy Any Car without admitting that it had a fault. They are the same people that would want your blood if you sold them a car that had an issue, whether you were aware of it or not. And I don't know. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. So some people just have it so ingrained in their head the dealer is the bad guy and they're out to get you, so it's absolutely okay to claim over. And I really don't know where this comes from. The majority of traders that I know are absolutely trying their hardest to sell decent quality stock that's prepared to a high standard and to stand behind what they sell and actually look out for their customers. And therefore, this perception that all dealers must be the scum of the earth, I just don't get it. But there we are. But I really want to know what you think on this one. Is it okay to just bin off a lemon to the trade, to We Buy Any Car, to whoever? Because, they deserve it. It's all right. It doesn't matter. But actually, the consequences of this and the people that actually get hurt by this are not who you think they are. What is also quite interesting is I saw a video the other day from Rob Cubitt from Cubitt Cars. He's got a YouTube channel called The Logbook, and there's a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. But he had an issue where a car that he had sold to a friend, then that friend went to sell it to We Buy Any Car. We Buy Any Car made an offer for it, they paid him for it, and a couple of days later, they actually come back to him and said, well, we've discovered that there's a problem with this car, and we're going to unwind the deal. We're giving you the car back, we want our money back, and that is it. Well, I think actually in this case, they hadn't paid out. They did the thing where it's takes 2 or 3 days to give him the money, so... But ultimately, they're unwinding the deal. They're giving him the car back. They're not paying him for it, and they're pulling out. And the reason for that was that the engine management light had been covered up. And nobody involved knew about this. So whoever actually sold it to Rob in the first place must have been who actually covered this up. And definitely check the video out because he's much better at explaining the situation than me. But ultimately, We Buy Any Car, or probably more likely BCA, when they went to put it into the auction, discovered that this thing had a permanent engine management light on, but there was no light on the dash, so the light wasn't working properly. And so they unwound the deal and they said, you're having your car back, we're not paying for it, we don't want it. And that makes you wonder, if you sell them a Nissan Leaf with a dodgy battery that you know all about, but you don't let on about, could they be within their rights to unwind the deal and land you back with it? It does make you think. Certainly it seems they're biting back, and it seems their terms and conditions actually allow them to do that kind of thing. So if you're thinking about unloading a lemon into the trade, you might want to think twice. But that was it. More of a rant than anything else. Do let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.